Welcome. You are listening to Our Mindful Nature, formerly titled The Mindful Minute. I'm your host, Meryl Arnett, and this podcast explores the deep connection between land and self through nature-based meditations and meditative experiences that invite us back into belonging to each other, to our ancestors, to the earth, and to all beings that make up this universe. If you would like to access these meditation practices as standalone audio files, please subscribe to my newsletter at merylarnett.com. It's free, and you'll receive a new mini meditation each week, along with behind-the-scenes content and bonus material for each podcast episode. All right, grab a cup of tea, pop in your headphones, and find a comfy seat. Let's settle in for today's episode. Hi, guys. Welcome. I am so excited to share today's episode with you. So, in 2020, experts at NASA's Chandra X-ray Center began the first ongoing sustained program to sonify astronomical data. The sonification project is led by my guest today, Dr. Kimberly Arcand, along with her colleagues, Dr. Matt Russo and Andrew Santaguida at System Sounds. These sonifications that we're going to talk about today of stars, black holes, the cosmos that surrounds us, they invite in an entirely new way of knowing the cosmos. It's one thing to see a singular image. I love looking at the images from the James Webb Telescope, for example. But it is data that is created as a singular static image, right? It's one way of knowing. And now we're going to have an entirely different experience by hearing data in an embodied way. This interview was a complete bucket list interview for me. I have to tell you, Dr. Arcand is a delight to talk to. She's a fellow meditator, so she really gets us in what we're here to talk about today. And she helps us, in truth, to really fully grasp the words that I know I use a lot, and I'm sure you hear from others as well all the time, the words of Carl Sagan that we are made of star stuff. So we're going to talk about what that actually means. Same with the words of Kabir when he wrote that inside the body there are hundreds of millions of stars. Dr. Kimberly Arcand is the visualization scientist and emerging tech lead for NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory. Arcand is an award-winning producer and director. She is a leading expert in studying the perception and comprehension of high-energy data visualization across the novice expert spectrum. We're the novices. As a science data storyteller, she combines her background in molecular biology and computer science with her current work in the fields of astronomy and physics. Today, Kim uses data to tell stories about science, whether in the form of a 3D print of an exploded star, a book about light, a virtual reality application for high-energy astrophysics, or the sonification of the cosmos. As we talk about the sonification of the cosmos today, I think you'll see that this is really another way of knowing or connecting to something that we think we know, right? We've all looked up, we've all seen the night sky, both outside of where we live as well as probably images. Meditation is exactly the same way. We think we know ourselves, and in many ways we do know ourselves. But then we get still and quiet, and we start to listen to what's happening inside. And suddenly a whole new field of insight and awareness is made available to us. If our vision is intact, we are so used to knowing through sight. We process, we orient, we navigate through our vision. But this is only one way of knowing the world around us or knowing the world inside us. By some accounts, humans have upward of 53 senses. We talk about five, 53 senses. There are lots of ways of knowing, and listening is the avenue we're going to explore today. Kim and I chat about what a science data storyteller does and how this relates to our work as meditators. We talk about the origin of the sonification project at NASA, how data is translated into embodied knowing. We talk about black holes as cosmic recycling centers and what happens when a star explodes, and about learning to hear what is unhearable. At the end, I'm going to guide a really unique meditation. I'm really excited to share it with you. I'm using 3 of the sonifications from Kim and her team, and we will map them inside the body, exploring what this data tells us about our own inner cosmos. Let's start with my conversation with Kim. Enjoy. Dr. Kimberly Arcand, thank you so much for chatting today. It's such a treat to get to meet you.
Thanks, Meryl. It's really nice to be here. And I love your podcast, what you're doing with this work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Um, so I was reading your bio, which is just incredible. Your background is so incredible, all that you do. And I was really taken with the phrase science data storyteller. I love this description of your work. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes there's this idea that science data is like cold and sterile and just, I don't know, disconnected from people's truth and reality, right?
Mm.
And my job essentially is to take information of our universe and translate it into some way that we can know it, that we can parse it, that we can experience it. Because most of the data that we're taking from telescopes of these distant objects far away, they're, things like pulsars and neutron stars and blazars and quasars. They sound very abstract and distant and strange. And so for me, like the work is really about taking those bits of code that we get, those binary pieces of information that the telescope captures, and then translating them into a way that we can experience them that hopefully brings that value of what the object is, what the scientific story concerns.
I think for our listeners who are meditators, I just want to throw out there, listeners, like, I feel like you too are some sort of data storyteller because we can look at our internal experiences and our thoughts as these like cold, hard facts about who I am or what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling. But also, there's so much in there for us to feel and process and explore in an embodied way. And when I hear you talking, Kim, what I hear is you're inviting us to sort of embody the experiences of the universe.
Yes, exactly. And I feel rather spoiled because for the past like 25 years, that's what I've gotten to do, right? I get to gaze out into the universe, so to speak, and travel there, right? Like astronomy is essentially time travel. That's what you're doing because the
Mm.
light to get to us has to travel so far in order for us to capture it, right? So we are time traveling back to some of the earliest days of the universe. We are seeing stars as they were sometimes in their infancy. We are seeing things that happened a long time ago. And it makes you feel very tiny, very young, very just a speck of a speck of a speck. And
Mm.
I like that kind of humbling because it kind of frees you up to go where you will with the data itself and just kind of enjoy the journey.
Yeah, and you do very creative work. I want to get into the sonification project, but I was seeing that you also do some sort of 3D printing around some of this imagery. So you explore it in many different avenues. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there's this idea that astronomy is very visual because it has been for a long time. People have looked up, right? That's how it started. But we have kind of advanced beyond just that sense of sight. We can now take tactile um, materials and create 3D models and 3D print them. And we can translate into sound. We can use haptic information, vibrational information, right? Like there's
Mm.
all these different ways. I would not go so far as to smell and taste. That's like for me too far. However, there is value in using other senses to understand the universe around you because different senses are attuned to different ways of knowing. For
Mm.
example, sound, you have a better sense of, like the needle in a haystack. You can hear things oftentimes in a more sensitive way than you can see them, particularly if you're given time. Because if you're seeing an image, it's all at once, right? But if you're hearing something, it's parsed out over time, and sound is sticky in different ways, and your brain can pick up different things. So, using these different senses just offers you other ways of experiencing the universe around you.
In my notes, it's so funny. What I wrote as I don't know that this will be the title of the episode, but what I wrote was another way of knowing. So I love that you just said that because it's really what I experience is, it's so easy to look at something and say, I know, I understand, right? And it's so different to close your eyes and listen and then what do I know? Do I know? It just opens up such a space, I think, of curiosity as opposed to, "I already know. I know what I'm seeing."
Oh, 100%. And the good thing about the universe is that we know nothing. We know such a tiny, tiny bit. And so you have to be constantly curious. You have to constantly be engaging and constantly learning. And if anyone ever tells you they know everything there is to know about the
Mm,
universe, don't listen because we don't
mm,
know anything. And I like that. I appreciate that mystery that offers you an endless scape of just this complete curiosity and possibility and discovery.
mm. Will you share a little bit about the origin story of the sonification project? How did this come to be?
Yeah, so it actually started with 3D modeling for me. We were working with some of my students in a lab, creating these virtual reality experiences of things like exploded stars. And I have colleagues who are blind or low vision. And one of them, Dr. Wanda Diaz, she has used the idea of data sonification or translating information into sound as a way of studying stellar populations. She uses it as a way to explore the world around her. And I was very inspired by that and thought, that adding a layer of sound data, translate into sound to a VR experience would just make it all the better. And we were working on that, and then the pandemic hit, and it just kind of sent everybody home and made me sort of change my point of view. And I had met some colleagues from a group called System Sounds, Dr. Matt Russo and Andrew Santaguida, and they had been doing some work in sonification, taking two-dimensional images and translating that data into sound. And I love that concept of just taking it a step back and just kind of simplifying the approach. And so we started working together during the pandemic as a way to keep working with the communities that we had already established relationships with, people who are blind and low vision, because I could no longer send 3D prints out into the world. I could no longer work on virtual reality that was more accessible. I thought that working with just image sonification would be another way of connecting to groups that I really wanted to make sure we kept relationships with. And then the whole thing just kind of exploded. Oh, I guess pun intended, right? Like
Yeah.
there is just this moment of realizing that yes, it was really wonderful for working with blind and low vision communities as well, but also sighted people experience the data in a whole new way. And people who are neurodivergent would write in and say that it helped them understand our universe in a different way. And it
Mm.
just launched a project that I just had not expected it to go where it did.
It's really incredible, and there are so many sonifications that you guys have created at this point. It's not just a image, it's many, many images at this point.
Yeah, well, we started it and we got a great response, and it's always so helpful when you get feedback that something is working. It gives you the power to keep doing it because, you know, we are all doing this on taxpayer funded. This is a NASA funded mission. So if something's not working, we don't do it, right? And
Right.
so having that community response, we worked with people who were blind or low vision, scientists, students, to validate these findings, to make sure everything was sounding good, that a mental map could be created. And just hearing from the communities, both that community, but also the communities at large, that this was a valuable way for them to experience this universe was just wonderful. It was wonderful to be a part of that.
Hmm. And my understanding from these sonifications is it's not, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's not like, here's this snapshot and now I'm making a song from it, but there's layers that create an entire composition reflecting different data points. Is that right?
Yes. So just like images that we collect of the universe, they are not, space selfies. They go through a process of translation. All of the sciencey goodness is wrapped up inside that data, and you have to extract it. Similarly, when we're translating it into sound, we work really closely with the data to understand what the scientific story is that needs to be told. Is it an exploded star that has different layers of chemical composition? And you want to be able to pick out each of those layers? Is it an area around a black hole where there's lots of high energy material and low energy material? And you want to be able to differentiate that kind of bits and pieces of information? Or is it something that's changing over time really dynamically and you want to be able to help showcase that change, that dynamic nature of that object, right? So the whole process of translation, whether it's an image, whether it's a time lapse movie, whether it is a 3D model, whether it is a sonification, it's all about taking that story and telling it truthfully in a way that adds value.
Mm. One of my favorite things about it is they're not all lovely, meditative, easy listening pieces. Some of them are,
Right.
some of them are, like, quite beautiful, and some of them are scary in a way, or, like, they feel disjarring in a way, and I think it's so valuable because it's really easy to look up and be like, "Oh, the beautiful sky." Like, how romantic and lovely. Everything is so peaceful, the same way we can do in our meditation practice, like, "I'm just here to be zen." And anybody who meditates knows that's not always the case. Right? And
Right.
personifications are like, it's not always the case that it's just a beautiful shining
Right.
star, right?
Exactly, because the universe can be very violent. There are exploding stars that hurl through the universe. There are galaxies that collide. There are black holes with jets that fire out. And the telescope I work for, the Chandra X Observatory, captures that high energy, sort
Mm.
of extreme place in the universe. But that's not to say there isn't balance, right? So
Yeah.
that star that exploded its guts out all over the universe, well, it eventually dissipates out and is collected up into new generations of stars that are born. And that is the same stuff that we are made of, that same iron in our blood, that same calcium in our bones, all of that material, right, might have had a violent eruption, but then it can create things like humans, right? So there's a wonderful balance to it, and I kind of like that there's two sides.
I mean, the metaphor for us as individuals is just amazing. It's a gift to reflect on that because when have we not had a day where we've just sort of exploded out onto everybody in our lives? We've all done that,
Seriously,
right?
exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it and think of it. Exactly.
So I'm curious if there are like future versions of this project you're working on or future projects that feel really exciting to you related in some way?
Yeah, so there has been a lot of interest in the music community from the sonifications. I'm very excited to see where that goes. I recently worked with a young composer, Sophie Kastner, who took one of the sonifications of our galactic center and translated into human playable sheet music, essentially. So took
Mm.
something that was created by computers, that really was not very human playable, because when you're creating a sonification, you're doing it digitally. So you have access to a million violinists and 100,000 flautists who can all trill at, incredibly wild notes. And so making something human playable was important because we had so many requests from people that wanted to be able to do it for themselves, right? To play this, to
Mm.
participate in a different way of knowing, a different, way of understanding and experiencing it. So I'm excited for some of those, and I hope the project will continue. It's been so rewarding to be part of this team and to be bringing this type of experience to people that didn't perhaps even know that that was a possibility to try. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm very curious if you have a favorite sonification.
It's so hard. I could say I do have a couple favorites. There's
Okay.
one that I will always remember because it was the very first one we worked on, and it is the galactic center of our Milky Way. It's this downtown region, super bustling. It's like New York Times Square, and it's just so dense and busy and beautiful and translated into the sweeping violin and beautiful melodic piano and trilling kind of glockenspiel to create a piece that to me really does translate the essence of that information, what is happening in that part of our galactic neighborhood. But there are others that I love as well. There's one that is of an image that is not terribly exciting looking. It's just a bunch of colored dots, like you took some sprinkles and tossed them onto a black plate. And that image is not lovely, but the science is it's a field of like thousands of black holes that Chandra
Mm,
found just by looking deep into the night. And we essentially coordinated them by energy level. And so as you're sweeping up through this field of black holes, it's in stereo sound, and you can hear all of these beautiful beeps and boops of these black holes far, far back in the ancient universe. And I just kind of love that one.
mm.
And if I could pick a third favorite, I would say it's the Perseus black hole, because that one was unique. That one was a scientific discovery from like 20 years ago, where we had realized, the scientists on the team had realized that this supermassive black hole at the center of a core of galaxies is burping out into the hot gas and causing these pressure waves, which are sound waves. And that sound wave was captured in an image and translated into the actual note, which is a B flat, about 57 octaves below middle C. So the
Mm.
sonification of that image essentially just brought that sound back up into human hearing, hundreds of keys back up so that we can hear it. And that is the one that people often say sounds like a horror movie soundtrack, sounds like a really tense movie screen music from like Hans Zimmer, whatever, you know what I mean? Like something tense and weird. But they're all beautiful in my ears.
That is so interesting. And so, if we use that black hole example, that sound wave, if we were in space, we wouldn't be hearing anything. Like our ears wouldn't pick that up, correct?
We couldn't pick it up. For one thing, we would be in a spacesuit, hopefully, or a spacecraft. But also, that note is too low. So even if we were in that cluster of galaxies, that note is too low. But that's not to say that there isn't sound in the universe. Scientists have come to understand from that first discovery of a black hole singing that there are these divas out in the universe singing these notes. We just can't hear it. We're too far.
Mm.
There's no stuff between us. The note is too deep. All of that, but I love the poetry of thinking of these, black holes sprinkled throughout the universe, singing a note too low for humans to ever know, to ever hear, to
Ugh,
ever really consider.
I love that. And the thought, as you were describing that one that's like a field of black holes, the thought of, I realize this is massive personification, but the thought of them speaking to one another, right, is so
Right?
beautiful. And it's so easy for us in a meditative or a yogic way to be like, we're all one, we're all connected. But then to give yourself a living, breathing example of like, here is sound that we can't hear, and yet it's present. And what
Exactly.
is between us that is here, and we just haven't found a way to sense it yet.
Exactly. And even more meta, those black holes, those are the cosmic recycling centers of our universe in a
Mm.
real way. And so that stirs up all of the stuff, all of the stars that will explode around them, and all of these, processes that eventually will lead us right back to that iron in our blood and the calcium in our bones. So that whole one universe thing is really a thing, because we are just all star stuff and the universe is stars.
And thank you for bringing that in because I, like every person on the planet, uses that Carl Sagan quote all the time. And it's so lovely to give the foundation of, like, it's not just a beautiful poetic statement, it is, but also there's science there. There's something
Exactly.
truthful to root into. I love that realization.
Yep.
Real quick, I want to honor your time. Can you just talk a little bit more about black holes being a recycling center? Like, give me a little bit more about what that
Yeah.
means.
Yeah. Well, black holes have this very bad reputation for being these cosmic Roombas in the sky, right? Just sucking things up. And, that said, I wouldn't want to get next to one. If you get too close, you can essentially, fall in because that gravitational pull is so strong up to a certain point. But for the most part, I mean, there's responsible for the care and feeding of their galaxy. Supermassive black holes, we know now, power the hearts of most galaxies, and they're kind
Mm,
of like the heartbeat pumping the blood out through the system. The activity from them, how active or not active they are, can have a huge effect on their entire environment around them, right? So it's just an ecosystem, right? Every galaxy is a little ecosystem, and every cluster of galaxies is a larger ecosystem, and it's all part of that universe. And so I think it's wonderful that though black hole can be a source of disruption and destruction, but they can also be a source of renewal
mm,
and a source of, creating those sparks for star birth and all of that, you know, stew out there to kind of simmer in a different way.
mm. I'm kicking off this month of sort of astronomical exploration the week that there's a total solar eclipse. And of course, this is quite different, but it is also a moment of like light being gone and light
Oh,
reappearing.
yes.
It's got that same sort of vibe to it, doesn't it?
And, I had my first total solar eclipse experience back in 2017. And I wouldn't say I was a doubter, but I didn't quite get it until I went through it. And I had my family with me, my kids and my husband. And it was such a moment of, oh, just zen and awe, and it's hard to describe when everything goes dark and quiet, and the wind feels like it shifted, and the change of the sounds, birds go quiet and bugs are no longer quiet. Like,
Mm.
all of the environment around you responds, right? And it is because it's an ecosystem, just like the universe is. And so having those moments where you can appreciate your surroundings in those ways, it's such a gift.
Mm. Well, this conversation has been such a gift. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you for putting these sonifications out into the world. It is truly awesome.
Oh, thank you. I have to again give thanks to all my colleagues and inspirations over the years. It's not a me project, it's a we
Mm,
project.
mm.
And yeah, it's a whole lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. What a conversation, huh? Since this conversation, which was a few weeks ago, I've really been sitting with Dr. Arcand's words and using her team's sonifications in my own practice. I've worked hand in hand with my sound partner, Nick McMahon, to create what I believe is a really powerful meditative experience using some of these sonifications. I recently read some of the work of David Haskell, who writes a lot about sound. And at one point, he wrote, listening opens us to what is hidden or unappreciated. Listening opens us to what is hidden or unappreciated. And I think perhaps this is the overarching invitation for our practice today. As we listen to these sounds, we are hearing the cosmos surrounding us, and I hope the cosmos within us. I know I mentioned in the beginning, but there is so many writings that talk about the landscape of the inner body, right? As a microcosm of the universe. Kabir writes about hundreds of millions of stars inside of us. We see those same writings in the Radiant Sutras, in poems across time, And in the words of Carl Sagan, from a much more sciency lens, saying in truth, we are made of star stuff, right? As we listen to the sounds in today's meditation, there are a few reflections that I just want to offer up as potential points of curiosity. The first one is a really interesting reflection on time, right? Because you and I are going to do this practice in the present moment, this moment, right here, right now. And it's a different time of day for each of us. We've had a different day. Some of us maybe have had amazing days thus far. Maybe the day hasn't even begun. Maybe you've had a really tough day. All of this impacts how we hear, what we hear, and how we feel about what we hear. And if you listen to this exact same practice tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, it will land differently. Different data will be available to you because of where we are in the present moment. Now, at the same time, hand in hand, what we are listening to is data that has been traveling to us for millions of light years. Millions of light years. This is not a snapshot from just this moment in space, right? This happened millions of light years ago and has been traveling towards us and was at some point captured and then translated into the sounds we hear. So the relationship to time in this practice is deep, vast, wide. It covers the spectrum of time. I also want to throw out there's an interesting reflection on connection that happens when we listen to these sounds. Because what we're hearing, the places and objects in the cosmos, they have been present for every iteration of Earth. From the creation of the planet to the earliest organisms, the earliest humans, and everything in between. I think it's safe to say that every human species and many animal species have looked up at the sky, whether for navigation, for curiosity, for stories. There is ancestral connection that can show up as we listen to the sounds of the stars. I know I have shared this in many episodes before, but truthfully, one of my very favorite reflections when I go outside at night and look up is that the moon I am looking at is not only the exact same moon that every single one of you listeners all over the world are looking at, but it's also the same moon that every single ancestor I have ever had has looked at. So we might invite in these curious or spontaneous or perhaps simply grateful appreciation reflections on time, on connection, on the cosmos itself. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to hear, and then we'll get right into our practice. So we're going to hear the three sonifications that Dr. Arcand mentioned as her favorites, right? What you'll hear first, and actually throughout the entire meditation, are ocean waves. These ocean waves were recorded by nature field recordist Nick McMahon, and they serve as our anchor, our tether. You see the space movies and the astronaut leaves the spaceship, right? And there's a tether. They don't just like go out. There's something that anchors them so that they don't get lost in space. We need the same thing in our practice. So the ocean serves as our home base, our anchor. And then we'll move into a sound that again will be repeated throughout the practice. And this is the sound of a black hole, Perseus black hole. And this sound is deep and cosmic. It's the sound I associate with like alien abduction, right? And I want us to remember what Dr. Arcand mentioned about black holes being these cosmic recycling centers, digesting what is no longer needed and releasing the building blocks of creation, right? And when I hear this sound, what I think of, what I feel internally is that energy that moves through our spine, right? Very often, metaphorically, the spine is referred to as a river. And today, we might think of this as a river, as a galaxy, as a black hole, or that black hole energy moving through our body, digesting what is no longer needed and releasing the elements of creation. We'll start down at the base of our pelvis, the root of our body, and we will travel the length of the spine, moving through our major energy centers. Those are usually called the chakras. And as we move through these chakras, we are going to hear the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And we're going to hear a couple iterations. So each sonification that we hear of the Milky Way galaxy adds a new layer of data, a new layer of knowing onto the previous sound. And so we'll let that carry us up through our spine, through our sacrum, our navel center, our heart, our throat, our third eye. And then when we reach the top, when we reach the crown, right, this is where we're going to hear that Chandra Deep Field South recording. And this sonification is not one specific dot in space, but a field that is filled with black holes and galaxies. And I find that the invitation in that sonification is one of deep connection, of really finding ourselves as a thread woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. So let's get ready to practice. Now, couple of notes. If you have headphones, I highly recommend you go get them and pop them in your ears if you can. The sounds are incredible, and I really want you to hear them. If you're listening in the car, if you're listening on the go, you will still hear them. I'm sure it is still a great experience, and I hope you'll come back and listen again with headphones. Gold star, if you go outside at night, you lay down on the earth, look up, and do the meditation. Totally fine to lay down at home, inside, during the day. It's all good. You pick your spot. Maybe lay down, maybe put in headphones. Take time to settle yourself. Get all the props that you need to feel comfortable, safe, supported. As you settle into your shape, letting your arms rest, maybe letting your eyes close. Let's begin our practice here with a deep breath together. Inhaling in, exhaling out a sigh. And we'll just do that again, inhaling deeply. Exhaling out a sigh. Letting your breath go back to its own comfortable pace. And beginning your practice by silently saying to yourself, now is my time to meditate. Now is my time to meditate. And as you say those words, perhaps you feel yourself settling a little heavier onto the earth beneath you. Letting the weight of your body drop. Letting the edges soften. And simply taking in the sounds of the waves. Inviting the ocean to serve as our anchor, our home base. Let breath move through you as you let go of everything that's already happened and all the things that we'll do later. And drop your awareness down towards the very base of your pelvis. The root of our body here. We hear the sounds of a black hole. The sounds of cosmic recycling. Digesting what is no longer needed, no longer true for us. And at the same time, releasing all the building blocks of creation. And feel your breath and your energy expanding. Awareness beginning to rise from that root, moving up the spine towards your sacrum. Sacrum is that flat, triangular shaped bone at the base of the spine. We breathe in and out of the sacrum, taking in the sounds of the Milky Way galaxy. Breath and energy invite us to travel. Slowly and steadily moving through the spine and up towards the navel center. Landing at the navel center to breathe in and out here. Listening, feeling, foraging for the sounds here. And with the breath deep and soft, we journey a little further. Energy of the spine of the black hole carrying us up into the heart center. Breath and energy continues to journey deeper, carrying us from the heart up towards the center of the throat. Journeying deeper, moving from the throat up right into the center of the brain. Midbrain, third eye spot. Our awareness gradually moves to the crown of the head. A vast opening here. A field of galaxies, black holes, a field of sensation and connection. And breath flows. We feel ourselves deeply woven into the fabric of the cosmos. And with this awareness, we start to send our energy back down from the crown to the midbrain, midbrain to the throat, to the heart, navel, sacrum, to the root. We let our breath and awareness spread throughout the entire body, fingertips to toe tips. And let's just spend a few more minutes here at the shore, lying on the earth and taking in the experience. And slowly deepening your breath here. Letting that breath expand through the entirety of the body. Wiggling your fingers and toes, finding those edges. And together we'll finish here with a deep breath in. Exhaling out a sigh. Taking all the time you need to let go of the practice today. To gradually blink your eyes open once again. Thank you guys for sharing in that experience, that exploration with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Huge thank you to NASA for the use of the sonifications and some of the images. I'm so grateful. An equally huge thank you to Nick McMahon for the use of the ocean waves and for the sound design and production of this experience. I'm deeply grateful. Thank y'all. Hope you enjoyed it. I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to Our Mindful Nature. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or leaving me a review wherever you get your podcasts. It helps others to find the show, and let's face it, we could all use a few more meditators in our lives. Our Mindful Nature is recorded on Muskogee land and produced with the support of Brianna Nielsen. Deep gratitude is offered to acoustic ecologists Gordon Hempton and Nick McMahon for the use of their nature field recordings in many of these episodes. To join my live classes, ask questions, or learn about my teacher trainings, please visit merylarnett.com. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next week.